The Abbotsford detached market is shifting and home sales are increasing for the Abbotsford detached, Abbotsford townhome, and the Abbotsford condo market. But what does this really mean for you as a homeowner here in Abbotsford? Are home prices actually increasing? Is the months of inventory shrinking? And is the Abbotsford real estate market finally taking a turn, or is this a seasonal trend? That's exactly what we're unpacking in today's video. In today's video, I'm going to walk you through the recent statistics for the Abbotsford detached, Abbotsford townhome, and the Abbotsford condo market. Let's dive in. Let's start here with the sales to active ratio of the Abbotsford detached market for the month of October. In October, the Abbotsford detached market represented a balanced market with a sales to active ratio of 12.2%. That was up from the 10.3% we saw in September. What these stats are telling us is in September, the Abbotsford detached market was in a buyer's market, and now the Abbotsford detached market has entered balanced market territory for the month of October. Next, let's move on to months of inventory. In October, the months of inventory for the Abbotsford detached market sits around 8 months. That means 1 out of 8 homes are selling and 7 out of 8 are not selling. In September, it was around 8.3. So months of inventory really hasn't changed month over month. Next, let's look at the average sale price. In October, the average sale price for a detached home was around $1.1 million. And this is up from the $1,088,000 we saw in September. Next, let's look at sales. There was 53 sales in October and only 47 in the month of September. Next, let's look at active listings. Right now, there are 435 active homes for sale here in Abbotsford, and that's down from the 457 we had in September. Coming back to active listings, one thing that we have to keep in mind for the Abbotsford detached market is 25 to 30% of the overall listing supply are tenanted homes that are listed right now. Next, let's look at days on market. Days on market for a quality Abbey detached home is about 17. It's down from the 25 we saw in September. Next, let's look at this measure right here, median percent of original price. So this right here is telling us Abbotsford detached homes are selling within 96.1% of their original list price. So in September, it was around 96.4, and the price per square foot right now is around $412, and in September it was around $417. Next, let's move on to the Abbotsford East market. In October, the sales to active ratio for the Abbotsford East market is 16.2%. That means the East Abbotsford detached market is in a balanced territory, and in September it was at 13%. Next, let's look at months of inventory. Months of inventory for the Abbotsford East market sits around 5.7, let's round it off to 6 months. So that means 1 out of every 6 homes listed is selling and 5 out of 6 homes are not selling. And in September, it was around 5.8. So no real change there month over month. Next, let's look at the average sale price. The average sale price for an East Abbotsford detached home sits around $1,078,000. That's down from the 1.1 million we saw in September. Next, let's look at sales. There were 25 sales in October and 21 in September. Active listings. There was 154 active listings in October, and that's down from the 162 that we saw in September. Days on market. Days on market for a quality detached home here in East Abbotsford is around 17, and that's down from the 30 we saw in September. There were 48 new listings in October, and this number is down from the 71 we saw in September. And what this is telling us is, folks, the people that were going to list their home this fall started the process late summer or early September. And a lot of people that are thinking about making a move are waiting for the spring market. Next, let's move on to the Abbotsford West detached market. In October, the Abbotsford West detached market still represented a balanced market with a sales to active ratio of 8.8%. And in September, it was at 9.1%. What these numbers are telling us is the Abbotsford West detached market is still in a buyer's market. Months of inventory for this area sits at 11.4. for the month of October, and in September it was around 11.4 as well, so not much change there. Next, let's look at sales. There were 12 sales in the month of October, and that's down from the 13 in September. Next, let's look at that average sale price. Right now, the average sale price for an Abbotsford West detached home is around $1,078,000. It's up from the $1,065,000 we saw in September. Let's look at the active listings. Right now, there's about 136 active listings. Days on market again are 17. That's down from the 19 that we saw in September. Next, let's look at new listings for this area. There was 41 listings here in October, and this is down from the 40 we saw in September. Next, let's look at the Central Abbotsford detached market. The Central Abbotsford detached market represented a balanced market with the sales to active ratio of 15.4% for the month of October. In September, it was around 15.5. Months of inventory in this area is around 8 months for October. Not much change month over month. Next, let's look at the average sale price. The average sale price for a home in Central Abbotsford was around $1,006,000 for the month of October. In September, it was around $1,032,000. So it's down month over month. Next, let's look at sales. There were 10 sales in October and 11 in September. Days on market, it was around 6 for October and 22 in September. So there's 65 active listings in October, and that's down from the 71 we saw in September. So in terms of sales, there's not much change here month over month. There were 10 sales in October and only 11 in September. Next, let's look at the Auguston market here quickly. So for the Auguston market, it's in a high seller's market at 50%. Months of inventory sits at 3, so that means 1 out of every 3 homes listed are selling and 2 out of 3 are not selling. This is down from the 4.9 we saw in September. The average sale price for a detached home in this area is around $1,187,000. That's up from the 1.1 million we saw in September. So right here, it's showing that prices are increasing in this area. Next, let's look at sales. There were 4 sales in October, and that's up from the 3 in September. Right now, there's 8 active listings. That's down from the 12 we saw in September. Days on market is around 41, and that's up from the 30 we saw in September. So homes are selling within 97.8% of their initial list price. Next, let's move on to the Abbotsford townhouse market. The Abbey townhome market is still representing a high balanced market with a sales to active ratio of 20.8%. That's up from the 14.6% we saw in September. Months of inventory. Right now, months of inventory sits around 5.5. Let's round that off to 6. So that means 1 out of every 6 townhome listed is selling. 5 out of 6 are not selling. In September, it was around 6.2. So it's down a little bit month over month. Average sale price. Right now, an average sale price for an Abbey townhome is around $644,321. That's up from the $633,000 we saw in the month of September. So that's approximately a change of 4.5% month over month. Next, let's look at sales. In October, there were 42 sales for Abbey townhomes. That's up from the 33 that we saw in September. Days on market is around 25, and that's down from the 27 that we saw in September. So if you look at sales are going up month over month, which is positive news. So there were 74 new listings in October. That's down from the 81 we saw in September. Next, let's look at the East Abbotsford townhome market. The East Abbotsford townhome market in the month of October represented a seller's market with a sales to active ratio of 22.5%, and it was up from the 7% that we saw in September. Months of inventory right now sits at 4 months for this area, and in September it was around 4 months as well. Let's look at sales. So the average sale price for October was around $728,000, and in September it was around $798,000. So the average sale price month over month is down. Next, let's look at sales. There were 9 sales in October. That's up from the 3 we saw in September. Next, let's look at active listings. For October, there is about 40 active listings. and that's down from the 42 that we saw here in September. Days on market for a quality East Abbey townhome is around 31, and that's up from the 18 that we saw in September. Next, let's move on to the Abbey condo market. For the month of October, the Abbey condo market represented a balanced market with a sales to active ratio of 14.8%. This is up from the 12.5 we saw in September. Let's look at months of inventory. Months of inventory now sits at 7 months for October. That's again the same in September. Let's look at sales. There were 47 sales in October, and that's up from the 40 we saw in September. The average sale price for an Abbey condo here in October is around $417,000. That's up from the 402 we saw in September. We saw 47 sales in October, and that's up from the 40 we saw in September. Active listings. Right now, there's 317 active listings. That's down from the 321 we saw in September. Days on market for the month of October was around approximately 32. So if you look at these stats for the Abbotsford detached and townhome and apartment market with sales, you'll notice that sales for each category is up. So for Abbotsford detached, sales are up approximately 10% month over month. And in the townhome market, sales are up approximately 35% month over month. And for condos sales are up by 22% month over month. And the interesting thing to notice, the average price is also up by 2.4% month over month for Abbey detached, and it was up by approximately 4% for the Abbey townhome market, and condos were up by 5% month over month. As we are reviewing these statistics, it's positive news to see increased sales activity across all three property types. And what's happening is, with the recent interest rate drop that we just saw here on October 29th, where Bank of Canada cut rates by 25 basis points, essentially bringing interest rates into supportive category, I think this decision alone will help move a lot of buyers off the fence. That's what we're seeing in my business, where a lot of the buyers that we're working with now are pre-approved to buy an Abbey detached home, townhome, and they're ready to start looking. But one of the things some buyers are missing right now is they're not pre-approved. They're out shopping, looking at detached townhomes, but they have no idea about what type of mortgage they can qualify for. Another thing to note right now is there's a lot of gloom and doom out there with the media. People are very upset and negative. Even I get comments on my YouTube channel saying the Abbotsford real estate market is crashing. The thing is, folks, the Abbotsford real estate market is not going to crash. The Abbotsford real estate market didn't crash during COVID when there was a lockdown for 3 to 4 months, or when we had 11 consecutive interest rate increases. Yes, there are tough times that the economy is going through with all the geopolitical stuff and tariffs, but that is going to pass. So if you are an Abbotsford homeowner and you've owned your home for a very long time, just remember the value of your home might have gone down on paper, but if you're living there enjoying your home, that value of the dirt for your Abbey detached or your Abbey townhome market is going to continue to appreciate month over month and year over year. And the way you make money in real estate is through holding it long term. When you're thinking about selling your home, it's very important to ask yourself 5 questions. And when sellers don't ask themselves or even answer these 5 questions, they're leaving thousands of dollars on the table. That's why you need to watch my next video, because I'm going to walk you through a list of questions you need to ask yourself before you list your home. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below about the Abbey detached, the Abbey townhome, and the Abbey condo market. Where do you think things are headed for the remainder of the year, headed into 2026? I'm Gary Dhindsa, and I'll see you next week.